Hi everyone, let's keep talking about Boeing since that's what's in the news right now. Then we'll talk about Nike as well as the usual data. Then we'll finish up with the charts as well as my results for the day and my thoughts going into tomorrow's session. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day that the markets are open as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So if you saw the Sunday video or any of the news here recently, you would know that a panel flew off of a Boeing 737 MAX, ended up being the door panel, and that was during flight, so that certainly was not good. And the stock plummeted on the day about 8%. We'll look at the charts later. But then there was more information found. United Airlines found some loose bolts on their door plugs, indicating that this could be a more widespread issue and not something that was unique to Alaska Airlines. Right now, there are a lot of 737s that are grounded, and especially on the back of the previous 737 crashes that we had, specifically to the MAX. This is another issue here for Boeing, a company that had been recovering quite well, and we saw that on the charts. And then sure enough, we had this issue and the stock plummeted. So remains to be seen how much more widespread this is. But there are inspections going on across Alaska Airlines, and I'm sure all of the other airlines that own these planes are going to be checking as well. And one other key highlight before moving on is Boeing does have 4,000 more orders to fill on the 737 MAX, which is their best-selling aircraft, and it of course remains to be seen how this issue affects those future orders. Boeing's issues have been how fast can they produce quality planes that people trust in order to regenerate those profits that they had seen in the past, and they continue to see speed bumps. Moving over to Nike, Tiger Woods ended his partnership with Nike after 27 years. There is no real news about why that happened, but this is a very long partnership, a very big partnership for Nike, and now it has come to an end. Of course, they said nice things about each other and that they are parting amicably. Who knows how true that is? This obviously doesn't have a specific impact on the company, but it is interesting to see when such a large company parts with one of its major ambassadors, and it's also excused to look at the Nike charts later in the episode. Moving over to fear and greed, basically flat. We saw a 1-point tick higher from the previous close at 73, so basically flat there, and you can see we did have a major tick up. I'm sure you were watching markets. We'll look at the charts later, but major tick up in prices. Everything's still in greed except for market volatility, and the major indicators here being these top three for me are still in extreme greed. Moving over to seasonality, we are still expecting bull days for these next 2 days. Tomorrow and the next day have high probabilities of bullishness, keeping in mind that there's probably going to be some kind of down move on Thursday due to that expiration of options coming a week from Friday. Moving over to the economic calendar, nothing really on there for today. Consumer credit, pretty high number, much higher than expectations. Didn't have a huge impact on markets. That was at the end of the day at 1500. And then tomorrow, not much on the calendar. 3-year note auction, fairly interesting. But then as we move into the week, don't forget Wednesday does have the 10-year note auction. I do think that's going to be quite important. And then Thursday, the big day for this week with CPI, core and headline, as well as the Fed balance sheet, always interesting. Moving over to Max Payne, currently sitting at 470, stock price 474, so we're above it. First call wall is 476, so we're still below that. Big call wall at 495, that's the biggest strike here for calls. Put wall 465, so we're stuck between those, at least for now, 465 up to 476. Remember, this is for the Friday expiration, so you could overthrow 476, certainly possible. Total options, only 700,000, put call ratio only 1.1, so numbers not super significant, but still worth looking at. Moving over to the charts, what an absolute face ripper. So we did expect bullishness. We talked about how the hourly chart did look like it was setting up for some bullish moves on that Friday session. The decline had been tapering, dips were starting to be bought up, and then sure enough, we got a massive run, absolutely straight up throughout the entire day. 1.43% to the upside, great move. Momentum ticking towards bullish on the daily chart. Super bullish here on the hourly chart. You can see we're super overbought as well. Hit that resistance at 474.78 and then pulled back from there. Also got very close to that trend line. You could argue that it touched it here on the daily chart. Let's go ahead and move that indicator just so you can see it. Yep, hit that trend line, hit the resistance right in that zone, also hit that same level as the left shoulder. So we made all of that ground up in one day. To me, that's actually kind of discouraging. So when we see face rippers like this, especially after a pretty steady decline, to me, this kind of looks like a counter trend rally. Just something to think about. Obviously, price action is king. So if it continues to go higher, you have to trade it like it's going to go higher. But does look like a counter trend rally, does kind of look like a bear market rally. Those tend to be a little bit more aggressive. RSI, not quite to the SMA here. It's got a couple more points to get there. SMA is sitting at 66. RSI is at 62.65. So watching that key level. If it does break out, you do have this previous high at around 477, and then my next level here, 479.30. Moving over to the NASDAQ, similar thesis, over 2% on the day, 2.07. Again, established a higher low here, rallied super aggressively, took out 4 different levels for me in one day. Very, very large move. So first one here at 398, next one at about 400.3, and then 403 also got taken out. Came all the way up to these trend lines, up around that 404.62 level. Does seem to be dropping just below that here after hours. So probably going to see a little bit of a pullback just because of how massive of a run we saw in one single day. And you can see that here on the daily chart. Big run, 5 consecutive days of pullback, pretty significant. Slight update on Friday, and then that straight up candle here today, gapped up, rallied super aggressively, all the way to the 9 EMA at 404.68. Touch that level. The question is, do we get back above the 9 EMA? Then we'd be in a bullish trend once again. The 9 is still above the 21, and we got above VWAP today on the daily chart. So technically, bull trend, do have to respect that. We closed at 404.95, so we did close above it. We're kind of below it here after hours. We actually dipped a little bit more, 404.50 in the after hours. So we're rejecting a little bit from there, but you do have to trade the price action that you have. So short term, we're bullish, below the 144 EMA, but above the 9 and 21, as well as the 55 EMAs on the hourly chart, and above all the EMAs and SMAs on a closing basis on the daily chart. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow. Russell 1.8 to the upside, momentum ticking towards bullish, above the 21 EMA, still below VWAP and the 9 EMAs on the daily chart. It is up a little bit after hours, so that's good to see. We'll put that on the 2-hour chart here. You can see 4 consistent candles of bullishness. After hours dipping a little bit, did close right on the high. Everything looks good there. Above the 9 and 21 as well as the 200. Still below the 55 and the 144, sitting at 197.88. So momentum bullish, RSI bullish. So could see a little bit more continuation there on the Russell. And then the Dow, similar thesis to everything else. Very strong move, 0.58. Closed above my level at 376.35. We're right at these wicks, right off of all-time highs. Does seem like it's going to do it tomorrow. Everything still looks good, even with Boeing pulling it down. Speaking of Boeing, let's take a look at it. You can see the massive gap here. Ended up doji on the day, minus 8%. Momentum rolling over as you would have expected. Interesting timing. It had been rolling over into bearishness. Get some news and a catalyst. Dips down even more, even faster. Let's look at that on the hourly chart. Not much to say, really. Massive gap down in the pre-market, consolidated sideways. Lots of trading in that same zone. So looks terrible. Next level for me, 214.36. Obviously, you would expect more downside, especially as more news comes out. And if that news continues to be negative, you would expect more bearish price action. Let's look at it on the longer time frames, see if there's any levels to deal with. So on the weekly chart, you do have VWAP sitting at 223.56. Didn't quite get that far. And then the 21 EMA at 216.63. Really, it's in no man's land right now, kind of sitting on these highs here from the 21 August and 28 August weeks. Moving over to Nike on the weekly chart. This is a stock that has been sideways for quite a while. It's coming off of its peaks here from November of 21 all the way up in this 175 range. You can see it there. Ended up topping out right around 178.75 or so. And then it pulled all the way back here to the lows in September of 22 down at $83. So pretty significant move. We're not that far off of those lows at $103. Most recent high was at 122. It did get above that here in April and May of 23, up around 227, but not great. It's really in this consolidation, not giving you any kind of clear direction. You do have maybe a short-term bottom on the weekly chart, Momentum continues to roll to the bear side on the weekly chart. Let's go ahead and look at the shorter time frames. This is the hourly chart. I did just add this trend line. This is the new base that I'm working off of. If that holds, that could be an interesting level to trade off of. Your stop for that would be around 102, so about $1 of downside risk, and then you'd be looking for a test of the 144 EMA at 105.87. So that's a pretty good risk reward, risking about $1 for a $2.50 move to the upside or so. So about a 2-to-1 risk reward on that trade if you do get that bounce. And then looking at momentum, it is still technically a little bit bullish. RSI not overbought yet, continues to swing up. Might see a little bit of a pullback down to the 55 EMA. That would be around 102.86. So you look for a pullback down to 182.86. That would give you an even better entry and a better risk reward up to that 144 EMA. And then if that 55 breaks, then obviously you're going to be out of luck, probably going to test this trend line. And then if the trend line breaks, then you're obviously out of the trade at that point, and you'd be looking down to 97.75 as your next support line. This was kind of an inverse head and shoulders here with your left shoulder, head, right shoulder, and that shoulder mark is the level that I'd be watching at 97.75 if this trend line breaks. So pretty good risk reward there. Daily momentum does look slightly bullish coming off of almost oversold conditions. Nike might have a little bit of a trade there, something worth watching. Moving over to Apple and Tesla, both of these had nice days, 2.42% and 1.25% respectively. Not super great, but bullish. Apple closing on its highs of the day, which is great. It is down a little bit after hours, but that's fairly expected. Momentum ticking towards bullish on the daily chart, also good. It is coming off of that 200 SMA on the daily chart, which is always a very powerful level. Got above the 144, almost to the 55 at 186.37. My level is 186.81, which does kind of look like where the 55 and 9 EMAs are going to converge. So I would expect at least a test of that level. Then we'll see what happens from there. That would also give you enough room for the RSI to touch the SMA here. So a little bit more bullishness on Apple, probably likely for tomorrow. And then looking at Tesla, we're back into the middle of this consolidation here. So this could go either way. I actually want to zoom out here on Tesla just a little bit. You can see these downtrend lines that we were watching for several weeks. We are just barely below that higher downtrend line. So that's going to act as resistance in my opinion. Let's go ahead and extend this lower downtrend out a little bit. A lot of trends converging at this 232.57 level. Obviously, this could go either way. We already saw one breakout here. Did fail, got back into the consolidation. If it breaks out again, that could be interesting. It's not really a higher low. It is really just off of this trend consolidation here. Momentum ticking towards bullish, RSI ticking towards bullish. So it does look slightly bullish, but really waiting for a move. If it breaks the downtrend line at about 241.73, that could give you an opportunity at least up to 246.39. And then if that level breaks, then you're watching for 255.44 once again, similar to move to what we saw here. So we got the breakout, ended up holding that level all the way up to that next resistance at 255, overthrew that one all the way up to 246.68 before breaking down pretty significantly. So similar move to that if it happens, something to watch for on Tesla. Moving over to staples and discretionaries, both of these bullish on the day, 0.74 and 1.7 respectively. Massive move for discretionaries, pretty impressive actually. So staples right at the SMA, right at my level, 72.50. If it breaks above this, could be pretty nice move up to $74. This trend has continued to be intact. Momentum basically zero, but slightly bullish. RSI chopping between that 50 and overbought conditions. So healthy rally. Everything looks good there for staples to push to $74. Discretionaries, while it did have a bullish day, we did get that bearish cross, which is not great. So the 21 is above the 9 EMAs here on the daily chart now. And the 9 EMA is also below VWAP. So also not great. Doesn't mean we can't overthrow this. Short-term resistance, let's go ahead and extend that out. Currently sitting at 178.43. And then above that, I have 180.10 as my more important level. You can see that's right on top of the highly traded zone. Lots of selling happened at that level before we saw that breakdown. Makes sense. Now we'll see what happens. If we get a push back up to that zone, momentum says we will. RSI gives you a little bit of room. We dipped below the 50 line, crossed back above it, and that's typically a bullish indicator, at least for a little bit. Moving over to oil and gas and energy, these had very rough days, especially with markets going as straight up as they did. They gapped down, not great. First candle was down 1% on the 4-hour chart. Next candle was up 1.33%. Ended up holding that 135.07 level on oil and gas. Also have this downtrend line that we wicked, ended up holding that as well. So not great. You did see a lot of volume come in on that dip low, which was good. And then similarly here on energy, I actually did not take off this position because I wasn't watching it as closely as I should have. If I was watching it, I would have closed the position. But then by the time I looked at it, it was already down in this 82.80 area. And then at that point, it was worth watching. And then it started to show a little bit of strength. So I left it on, ended up closing above where my stop would have been at 83.55. I use mental stops, doesn't always work, but it's a pretty small position for me. I'm really only looking for about a $1.50 profit here. And I still think energy overall does have some potential. I think it's been sold off. It's not a very loved sector right now, which tends to give you a little bit more opportunity. So watching 83.55, want to see it push back up to 84.55. Potentially look for that 87.37, which was my initial take profit. Didn't quite get there here before selling off pretty aggressively over the last few days. Still bullish on my thesis, but not a great day. Moving over to financials and healthcare, I just want to highlight the fact that these continue to break out. Super bullish. Healthcare making almost new highs, very, very close. It got above 140.16, which is this high going back to December of 22. Next level, 144.70, which is almost all-time highs. Let's go ahead and add a level at the all-time high here, right at that wick high, 143.39. So healthcare going absolutely bananas. We just had an article where we talked about how healthcare is going to benefit from AI, and that could be driving the growth here. And then financials, finally recovering. They had been suffering a lot as yields were going higher and they owned a lot of long dated bonds. But now that those yields have come in, they are starting to profit a little bit better from those higher interest rates. And you can see this run we've had absolutely massive here on banks. 16.6% from those lows, and they continue to head higher. Next level 38.30, above that 39.70, and then if we get above those levels, all-time highs could be in sight up at 41.65. So safer sectors continue to rally. Moving over to breadth, the 20-day average did exactly what we thought it would. Came into this 51.75 area. We did get a slight bounce on the Friday session. We said if it was going to happen, it should happen now. And then sure enough, we got a massive rally, 25.95% on the 20-day breadth, almost to the 55 EMA. Let's go ahead and extend out that downtrend line. We might end up hitting that here, just a couple of points higher, just behind that 55 EMA. Does seem like we have at least one more day of bullishness. And then again, on the 50-day average, we did get a slight bullish candle. We're still in these very extended levels. Let's go ahead and look at that on the weekly chart. This is 5 weeks in a row now we've been in this very extended area. Talked about it a lot of times. Go ahead and extend it out one more time. We were here for about 5 or 6 weeks in April of 21, but typically it's pretty short-lived when we get into these zones before we break down. Even going back all the way here to 2016, we had a period of a couple of weeks in this zone, but it is not very frequent where we see very extended conditions hanging out in this zone for a longer period of time as momentum continues to roll off. So something to watch, almost a historical event, and we'll see what happens as we go forward. But right now, it does look slightly bullish. Moving over to yields, 2-year doing nothing, bouncing off of that 21 EMA, still in the same zone. 10-year did pull back a little bit, 0.44 down off of that 200 SMA, which did hold. Momentum still technically bullish. RSI bouncing off of that SMA. Almost got to the trend line, didn't quite get there. See what happens. I'm still waiting for the yield curve to revert. We are very close now with the 10-year above 4% and the 2-year sitting at 4.375. So I would expect this to go higher. We'll see what happens on that 10-year note auction that I mentioned on the economic calendar. Moving over to the dollar on the hourly and the daily chart. Not much to say here. Consolidated into the open, sold off pretty aggressively with yields. Ended up bouncing almost off of that 144 EMA on the hourly chart. Ended up getting back above my trend line here at 102.22. It's also above that 21-day moving average at 102.18. Momentum on the daily still bullish. Does look like a bit of a consolidation here. Waiting for that 9 EMA to move higher. If the 9 EMA on the daily chart holds, then we could start to see this break a little bit higher. But it does seem like momentum is fading, even with that very slight step up here that we saw today. Moving over to bonds. Both of these caught a little bit of a bid. I don't fully believe it quite yet. J&K did get a roll up on momentum, which is good for them. Got right up to that trend line, still below the 9, but it did get back above the 21 as well as VWAP. So kind of in limbo land. If this establishes a lower high, that's going to be quite bearish. Similarly on TLT, ended up getting back above 96.50, still below the 921 in VWAP, but it is back above the 200, which is interesting on the daily chart. Momentum still bearish. RSI bouncing off of that 50 line, got all the way down to 49.63, and then bounced up to 53.48. So that's a little bit bullish, but again, it's going to be a little bit of limbo for me. Coming off a high, made a clear lower low, took out all these EMAs, took out a level. Now we're bouncing. You would expect this to be met with sellers if it makes it up to that 98.87 highly traded zone. Moving over to volatility, gapped up, fell, got back into that same zone, 13. Still slightly elevated off these most recent lows. It is technically below that trend line, so that's not great either if you were looking for more downside. If we see another fall, I would look for a move down to 1239 at these previous lows. We are right at the SMA on RSI, momentum rolling over. Both of those to me mean we're moving a little bit lower. It is a critical point. If we see a bounce, wouldn't shock me, but overall I would expect this to go a little bit lower tomorrow. Moving over to my accounts, I did pretty well. 1.1% to the upside. I was bullish going into the session, and I got more bullish as it took out my levels to the upside. So I have my 400 shares, I have my 2 covered calls. I also rolled these out in time a little bit and up as well. So I'm back out here to 25 days from now, up to 398.78 for $10 credit. So that gets me all the way up to 409 as a max profit over the next 25 days. And then here 397 for $10.80, which takes me all the way up to 408 or so. So on both of these contracts, about $400 more potential profit before I hit my max profit on these shares. So 400 times 4 would give me about $1,600 potential profit on this current position over the next month or so. If it continues to break higher, I do have a little bit more room to move out in time if I need to, but right now I'm just going to sit on it. Looks good for me right now at 25 and 32 days, deep in the money, so well protected, continuing to make money on these shares. IWM, I did roll this out one strike as well to 32 days at 188 for almost $11 credit, so that puts me at 199 for that max profit. So that gives me about $2 more of potential profit there in about a month's time. We'll see how that one goes. And then I still have my XLE position at 85.50 for $1.40 credit. Obviously lost a little bit of money with that moving down about $1, but it was up a little bit after hours and I still like energy in the medium term. Moving over to my profit and loss graph, you can see everything is bullish. I have no point where I go negative to the bull side, so I am positioned bullish here. I would start to lose money if the NASDAQ fell below 387.50, so that would be quite bearish for me, but realistically I would take off these shares long before I got to that position. So position bullish, max profit, $4,182 in 32 days, which would be perfect for me. That would be great. That'd be about 4% in a month, which would be fine. And that doesn't include my other positions if those worked out as well. So overall, positioned well, played out well, looking for a little bit more bullishness tomorrow. Let me know down in the comments section what you think of Boeing. Is there going to be more issues, or have we seen the worst of it? Or Nike. Do you like Nike? Do you like that setup? Do you like me giving trades like that? I do think that's a pretty good setup right now. And if you do like that kind of content, maybe I'll include it more, or maybe try to do separate videos for that kind of stuff. Let me know down in the comments section. Otherwise, like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video. Make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.